All right, there we go. How's everybody doing today? I was a little sick from my previous video. If you guys saw that, I'm still kind of congested. I think I have some sort of cold or sinus infection, but I didn't want to leave you guys without a video today. And also I didn't want to be laying in bed all day today, even though I'm not feeling the best. I do want to go outside. This video is for somebody on the comments that wanted to see a video of me using ND filters. And in order to do that, we have to go outside where the sun is at. So let's go ahead and do that. Let me unplug this thing. All right, guys, here we are. Straight sunny day outside, no ND filter. Somebody on the comments was asking me if I could make a video on ND filters, and that's what I'm doing today. I know I made a couple before, but this one's just gonna be focused strictly on why I use NDs and how I use them. Do you need to buy them and stuff like that? Hopefully this answers those questions. I'm gonna try to get right to it because I know I tend to ramble a lot. I'm working on that, guys. I get sidetracked so much. So, okay, the first thing I wanted to talk to you guys about, if you're a beginner and you're just watching this video, you don't need NDs to use this camera. This camera exposes completely fine outside in any type of lighting. You don't need NDs. The only reason why you would need an ND is if you want to improve your motion blur, or like, this is motion blur. If you can see how my hand moves, it looks kind of like, look at the motion on it, the motion blur on it. It looks kind of like there's like a strobe light effect almost to it. Like it's kind of like, doesn't look natural. We're used to seeing the 180-degree rule on movies and stuff that we see, which obviously doesn't look like this. And so in order to get to that, there are very specific, there's a specific like formula you need to do, like doubling your frame rate and shutter speed. You can watch another video on the 180-degree rule that can better explain that than me. I don't want to get blasted on the comments, people telling me I don't know what I'm talking about. But basically there's this rule that, for example, right now I'm shooting at 24 frames, and in order to get that natural motion blur that we're used to seeing, you got to double your shutter speed to whatever frame rate you're filming on. So for example, I'm at 24 frames. Doubling the frame rate would be, doubling the shutter speed would bring me to 1/48th of a second. This doesn't have 1/48, so we're gonna get to the closest one, which is 1/50th. And that's gonna give me the natural motion blur. But if I am at 1/50th, that means that the shutter speed is too slow, which means it's letting more light in, and I will be completely overexposed if I was in this situation where I have harsh lighting right now. No way to bring it down except ISO, and even if I crank the ISO all the way down to 50, I'm still overexposed. It's just too much light. So that's where ND comes in. And ND is basically sunglasses for your camera to cut light. And there's different strengths depending on how much light you need to cut and what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to achieve a creative look where your motion blur is super slow and you're getting all that drag shutter effect for a certain shot, then that's more on that pro level for being creative and stuff. That's when you're gonna wanna use stronger NDs and stuff like that. Also, when you use stronger NDs, your ISO will tend to crank up a little bit more, which if you're in a not so bright situation could introduce some noise and stuff like that. So you really have to dial it in when using NDs with that kind of stuff. But today we're gonna be talking about the Osmo Pocket and NDs. Like I mentioned, you do not need NDs to use this camera at all. If you're a beginner, if you're just starting out, you don't know anything about cameras, you've been seeing more, you got your Osmo Pocket now and you're like, what else do I need to get to make this thing work? You don't need anything else. You can use it straight out of the box. The only thing I do recommend is eventually getting a microphone, or if you get the creator pack, you're gonna be set because you're gonna get the best audio that way. And I think the audio is way more important than having an ND filter. So if you can, let me show you guys. If you can see right now, I have no ND. This is the stock lens, no wide angle lens on it or nothing. There's not a single, look at the sky, it's perfectly exposed. I'm exposed correctly. All you have to do is bring down the exposure EV. And in order to do that, go from the right, swipe left, go to the Pro. On exposure, it'll say auto by default. Click on that, and on the left side, you'll see an EV dial. Dial it down to negative 0.7. That's gonna underexpose like a stop or so, and you're gonna get perfect exposure, and you can now rock with this everywhere you go. I don't even change it. I leave it on whether I have an ND or not. I don't use NDs because I like to make my life easier. I bought this camera because I wanted things to be very easy. And motion blur right now, if you're watching this video and you're not even caring, or you don't even know what motion blur still really is, then see, that makes my point. It doesn't really matter, but you hearing me clear with this microphone matters more. So get the microphone. Don't worry about NDs at the moment. If motion blur is something that you don't want to see the strobe effect or whatever, it does change too. Like as you're moving around, it gets brighter. You are gonna get more of this jittery effect, especially if you're like walking back and forth, like you're trying to talk, like you might get it depending on how much movement you're working with, and lighting that's hitting you too on top of that. Okay, so now if you are wanting to get an ND because you do want to keep that motion blur, I'll show you exactly what that motion blur looks like. So I'm gonna break this down in 2 modes. And we're only gonna use the ND32 by K&F. I love K&F. I've been buying all of their Pro Mist, their ND filter, and their wide angle lens. I think it's a great company. This is my first time using them for Osmo Pocket. And I've been in love with them. I'm sold with K&F for their products on the Osmo Pocket. So I don't want to be carrying a bunch of NDs. I already find NDs to be a hassle to be taken off and on and off and on, especially when going inside my house and places when I'm actually vlogging. I'm a vlogger, guys, and I'm assuming that if you bought this camera, that means that you're also trying to vlog and just go about your day and not have to worry about carrying more things besides this little case. So in this case, you have a little magnet at the bottom to carry one Pro Mist filter or an ND filter, and then the top is for your wide angle lens. So that's exactly what I have in there. I only use the ND32. I try to make my life simple. And like I mentioned, I'm gonna break this down in 2 modes. There is the full auto mode. So you're saying, why would you shoot in full auto and then stack an ND on it? And the reason is because when you put the ND, it's gonna bring down the exposure, which means the camera is gonna wanna bump up the ISO or slow down the shutter. And that's going to keep you at lower shutter speeds. It's still gonna fluctuate, but it's gonna keep you at lower shutter speeds, therefore reducing the amount of like strobe effect that you're gonna get with this. Like here, let me move fast, see if I'm moving fast. Like, see how this looks jittery? Like I'm just moving it, I'm moving pretty fast. It looks kind of jittery and weird, like it almost looks intense. Now let's throw on the ND32. I don't recommend stacking these. So now that I have ND32, see how smoother my hand looks now? This is still full auto, guys. This is mode 1. I call it the full auto with ND. And now I can walk around and hopefully look at when the house moves. It's still a little jittery, but not as much as it used to be because the shutter speed lowered down. It's probably not at like 200 or you know, 300 or however fast this thing goes. It's probably dropped down to, you know, 80, 70, maybe 100, and therefore giving you a little bit more of that natural motion blur. It's probably not gonna still get down to the 50th where you get the true full motion blur, but it's gonna improve the feel of the video. And this is probably the easiest way to use ND filters if you don't want to fiddle with settings and you don't really know what you're doing. It's just to slap it on there when you're outside and you're gonna get a better motion blur and stuff like that. Here, I'm gonna move around so you guys can see this. Okay, let's move a little faster. See, you can see the jittery and things, like you can see the house just jitter a little bit when I'm moving around and my hand still, but it's a lot less. Now, the best way to use this is the next mode, which is what I call the semi-auto. And this is what I currently use if I want to keep that motion blur. And that is leaving everything in auto white balance, auto ISO, I leave the full range. I'm shooting a normal color profile, which means the ISO range is going to be 50 to 6400 on this. You guys know my whole theory about normal and D-Log. You can go watch the D-Log M video and check out, you know, what that looks like, and you guys can let me know your thoughts. But I shoot normal color profile. The only thing I'm gonna do is go to exposure and I'm gonna lock the shutter at 1/50th, and you're gonna be able to see consistent like motion blur, and it's just gonna look a lot smoother. It's gonna stay like that throughout the whole video. And then the reason why I leave auto ISO is because I want it to still be able to fluctuate between some dark areas when I go in and out, or like go under a tree and out when I'm walking around and stuff like that. So here, let me do that for you guys. So now we're gonna go into the next mode, which is semi-auto. All right, guys, look at the difference in using manual versus auto with NDs. So this is my thing about using auto and then manual exposure. The camera is doing something weird with the exposure where now you don't like, you see, I'm losing some like I feel like my shadows are a lot darker. The highlights are a little bit, they're not blown, but it's just everything looks a little bit different. Like I can't even barely see my face on the screen. I'll have to look at it when I come back into DaVinci or whatever, when I look at this footage in post. But either way, look at this. Now it looks very natural. You look at my hand. It doesn't look, the motion looks a lot better. It doesn't look like all jittery like it did before, kind of like that strobe light effect. Let me walk around. This is what people associate. If you're a beginner, you're not used to seeing this stuff. You've been seeing it all along, and that's how sometimes people say, oh, you know, the Osmo Pocket looks like a cell phone footage. The reason why is because we're used to seeing cell phones, you know, use automatic settings, and they don't get this natural motion blur when they're walking around and filming. So here, I got the natural motion blur. I'm gonna keep moving my hand because that's how you're gonna be able to tell. But look, see, it's like, I feel like the camera just doesn't expose, even though it's on auto or semi-auto. I'm letting the ISO fluctuate so the camera can make up a little bit for some of those dark areas. Now ND32, I found that is the, if I'm gonna carry one filter, I would just carry ND32. Keep things very simple. I don't wanna carry more things. The reason, like I said, I got this camera is because I want it simple. So ND32 works for me for outside, for anything when I feel like getting this cinematic look, motion blur, but it does mess with the exposure, and I feel like I have to, most of the time, bring down highlights and up the shadows up in post because of the way it exposes it. Here, I'm gonna try bringing up the EV to 0 live right here. So here, let's go up to 0 with the ND. So now it's at 0 with ND. The shutter speed is still 50. So the semi-auto keeps the consistency on the motion blur, and then it just uses the ISO to go up and down and adjust your exposure. Still, I feel like it's exposing things a lot different. Look, I'm not gonna move. I'm gonna leave the ND on, and I'm gonna switch it back to full auto. So I'm gonna take it off the 1/50th, and then look, pay attention to how my hat and all the shadows and everything look, okay? I'm gonna stay in the same place. Here we go. All right, there we go, guys. Full auto, back to mode number 1, full auto with ND, full auto white balance, normal color mode, auto everything auto. But look, now I can actually see my face. Still, the sky's exposed correctly. Everything looks pretty good to me. I have a little bit of that jitter effect, but even like a backlit, let's go back to a backlit situation. Like, look at that. The auto is doing some sort of HDR exposure. I talk a little bit about it on the D-Log video, so check that out. But that's what I use. I can play with it a little bit better in post. It helps me keep a consistent color grade throughout. I literally color grade one clip, and then I copy and paste it on the entire YouTube video, whether it's 30 minutes long, and I'm set. I don't have to touch any other settings. I don't adjust each clip or anything. It makes my process so much faster, and I don't think people really care so much about motion blur. I would say that it's probably overrated by now, but audio isn't. I think having good audio is gonna always overpower anything. You could have a really decent, crappy, or whatever, you have a really bad image, and if your audio is pretty good, like, people will still enjoy watching that. There's something that with audio that I feel like it turns more people off than having like this type of motion blur. But using the ND in full auto, like, look, it does cut it down. So I honestly feel like I'm leaning more towards putting this on in full auto. I haven't used it this way, but I'm using it right now to answer some of these questions that people have been asking. But if you're gonna use ND and you're a beginner, you don't wanna mess a lot with it, but you still wanna have less of the jittery effect, just get an ND32, slap it on there, and that's gonna give you a wide range. Now, the problem with having NDs, here's another thing too, guys. If you're a beginner and you're new to this vlogging thing, or NDs, and you're curious about it, let me show you what the problem is. Is if you're filming, and let's say I'm talking to you guys about something, now I wanna go inside my house, I'm gonna have to take this thing off. So now I'm inside of my house, and you can keep playing, babe. My daughter's playing piano. Now that you're inside the house, like, this ISO is probably cranked up super high right now, which is gonna introduce more noise. The ND is still on, but now I have to stop and These things are not that easy to take off. You know, you got to be careful because they do flip. They're super thin. And now we're back to full auto. See, now it looks really good. And I can go inside the house and continue vlogging and doing whatever. You know, the camera's gonna adjust for inside the house. But then if you go outside, you're gonna have to stop, put the ND on, put this thing away, and then go outside and continue filming. So if you want to keep doing that on and off when you're outside and inside, you can go ahead and do that, but you know, it's just another little step. I like to just I like to not worry about it. I like to just go on about my vlog. If I'm telling you guys a story, I don't want to be cutting those scenes. I want it to be flow, like all throughout the whole story. Whether I'm going inside or outside, I want that flow to keep going. I don't script my videos, so when I'm talking, I tend to ramble a lot. It's one of my weaknesses, and I need to be able to stay focused and talk about what I need to talk about. But if motion blur is super important to you, then go ahead and do it. And lastly, guys, so I hope this answers some of your guys' questions, especially if you're a beginner and you don't know if you want to get NDs or not, or if they're even a thing. I don't think you need to get a whole pack of them. If you are a beginner, if you're a professional, obviously you know what you're doing. You'd probably stopped watching this video already. Like, you're still on the verge of like deciding, do I need an ND, should I or not? I don't use them as a vlogger because I just don't like that it slows me down. It's another thing I have to carry. I'd rather have a Pro Mist filter in that slot and have that more mist effect or that softness to the highlights and shadows than carrying an ND filter. One last thing I need to mention, if you are going to be getting NDs, I don't recommend stacking them with the K&F filter. You get wonky flares and stuff like that. Now, Freewell does make stackable filters. I bought those before, returned them. It's just too much. With the wide angle lens, you have to stack the macro, the wide angle over that, and then an ND, and I still feel like it's getting some weird like fringing from all those pieces of glass in the footage, when especially around trees. Go back to my Freewell video, and I believe I went on a walk with it. Just look at the trees, look at the backgrounds. There's a lot of weird coloring things happening there, and I do believe it's because you got the stock lens, you got the macro lens, you got the wide angle lens, and then you got an ND on top of that. It just really messes with the image. The best image you're gonna get is straight out of the stock lens that we're using here, the 20mm. It is pretty tight for my liking. I would rather have something that looks kind of like this, but I don't have to stretch my arm out. And this is like my comfortable area for me to film, and it's like too tight to my face. So I do use this one. Let me switch over for you guys. Look at the difference. Like right now, this is the stock lens, right? This is like how comfortable I am. It's like my arm's like, it's got a nice bend to it. I can put my elbow by my rib, and it gives me a little bit more support. And if I use the wide angle lens from K&F, let's take off this ND. I can be, oh, see, this is the thing. You want to get NDs, hopefully you don't drop them or get finger smudges on them, because you will. I'm gonna get the wide angle lens from K&F. Let's put that on. It has really strong magnets too, by the way. Here, look, now I'm at like, now I have it really close to my arms, and look at all this I'm getting. Yes, there will be some sort of distortions on the edges and stuff like that, but I think it looks really, really good. It's not a big deal. Most of the time, you guys are gonna be paying attention to the viewer or the person that's talking and stuff like that, but I just really love the wide angle lens. So you can't, unfortunately, stack the ND on this. And if you do, you're gonna get vignetting, and you're gonna get some weird color fringing and stuff like that. If you don't believe me, play around with it yourself and let me know. I hope this video helped you guys. I'm feeling a lot better. I took some Dayquil today, so the next video I got coming up is going to be on how I edit my audio. It's gonna be a short one, but I hope you've been enjoying these videos and the way I teach. I hope I didn't ramble too much this time. I got a comment on my D-Log M about some guy, Bob, said I ramble too much. And yeah, so I'm trying to work on that. Bob, thank you for your encouragement, and all criticism is welcome. I'm here to improve, and I'm gonna document my journey, and I can hopefully come back and remember when I used to ramble a lot. But we can't get better if we don't get into a place that we're not comfortable in and continue to work through that. So I wanna encourage people that feel like they ramble too much to not care and start recording and making your videos. with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.